Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of those who are joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time and welcome to our briefing on navigating AI governance in retail. Today we'll walk you through some lessons learned and some real-world scenarios of how to deploy responsible, well-governed AI in your business. My name is Brian Atkin. Delighted that you're all here to join us today. At Kroll, we're naturally always looking to provide thoughtful insights and great value to our clients to help them defend their organizations against modern day cyber threats. So again, thank you all for joining. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a couple of operational items. The session today will be conducted on the On24 platform. You'll notice a menu bar docked below the presentation screen. Please use that bar to access the chat, Q&A, and there's an additional resources tab. Please add your questions as they come up. We'd love for this to be interactive. We'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A, and our speakers will address them during the next session. I hope it might be useful to provide just a quick intro to Kroll if this may be your first foray into what Kroll does. Kroll's actually been around for about 50 years. Intro to Kroll, we're a leader in cyber and data resilience, provide services to organizations all across the world. We merge elite cybersecurity and data risk experts, frontline intelligence, from thousands of incident response cases, right? We're on panel for about 85 different cyber insurance carriers, and all of those incident responses and frontline intelligence really inform the rest of our business. We have expertise and experts that bring decades of years of experience across law enforcement, different Department of Justice, Department of Defense backgrounds, cyber risk consultancy, and government intelligence agencies. Again, to help organizations across the world just simplify and reduce the complexity of implementing, transforming, managing, and operating their cyber programs. So with that, over the next 45 minutes, we'll be going through some of the top innovations that we're seeing in retail, the high stakes AI risk landscape in retail, some of the more nascent laws and regulations that continue to come out into the forefront. We'll walk you through what it looks like to have a full-fledged AI governance lifecycle. We'll walk through some actual real-life use cases and case studies that we're seeing in the industry, and then we'll leave and wrap up with some key takeaways. Before we dive into it, I want to quickly introduce my colleagues here that have joined me, Nick and Alex. Why don't you go ahead, Nick, and say a couple words about yourself, and then we'll pass it to Alex.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Ellison, a managing director in our cyber and data resilience practice. I'm an engineer and developer by background, but now very much focused on best practice advisory across software development, data privacy, and increasingly AI governance. Great to meet you all.
Thanks, Nick. My name is Alex Kerberthwaite. I'm the technical director for research and development on our offensive security team. So really kind of responsible for making sure that all of our pen testers and red teamers have all the tools and techniques to handle whatever our clients throw at us. And in particular, I've developed our AI security assessment service over the last number of years. Brian?
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Great to have you here. So very quickly, just to provide kind of a quick high-level overview of the innovations that we're seeing that's really driving AI adoption in retail. It really comes down to, in our view, these 6 major pillars here. Product development. Industry leaders have slashed product development time and getting products out to market from 9 months to 6 weeks using GenAI. So a great use case there. Personalization, I'm sure nobody is unfamiliar with this. If you log into your Amazon account or really any retail account, you've been getting prompted to purchase, like-minded items more than likely for years now, right? 60% of all retailers are now using some notion of AI for precision-based targeting from their marketing and advertising groups. Customer service, this has been around again for a while, but now reporting over 70% of all customer service interactions have some sort of AI behind them. Supply chain, right? Companies deploying AI in logistics are reporting a 15% cost reduction across operations. Pricing, there's been some significant enhancements in the pricing component so that companies are not overextending on their discount and as able to protect their margins. And perhaps most interestingly is the workforce component of this. We're noticing about 46% of retail organizations could be augmented, amplifying human capabilities. And I think the notion there of AI augmentation is really kind of fundamental, not to necessarily replace or automate entirely, but I really like the notion of AI augmentation, amplifying human capabilities. AI works best when there's a human in the loop to oversee any critical implications negatively that you may undertake. So kind of as a dovetail into that, what are the risks that come with this? And I think that's probably top of mind for everyone here. We really believe it's in three primary buckets today, compliance being one of them. 60% of all retail executives now rank AI compliance as their top concern. I think with the nascent kind of regulatory landscape constantly changing, folks are struggling to keep pace with what those are. So data privacy and protection under GDPR or the EU AI Act, transparency and explainability, as well as understanding your third-party AI vendors and the risks that they may expose, top of mind for nearly every individual leader that we speak to. With the advancement of AI, naturally, it's easier to amplify the cyber threat landscape, right? So 41% of retail organizations have noticed at least one AI-related security incident in the past 12 months. You've probably seen a lot of information around prompt injection attacks, model manipulation, data poisoning. Alex will go into much more detail on that when he covers the OWASP landscape. And then fraud. A significant increase in the amount of deepfakes. And I think a staggering statistic is that there's one fraud attempt in every 127 customer service calls. So that's a spike of 1,300% in 2024. We continue to see that evolve into 2025 and beyond. I touched earlier on the regulatory landscape. As of early 25, 69 countries are now proposing more than 1,000 different AI-related policy initiatives, legal frameworks, or regulations. So this will continue to evolve, obviously, with the new administration here in the States and the federal kind of stepping behind the scenes. I expect more state-level laws to come out in jurisdiction here in the States locally. When we think about AI strategy, I want to quote Sun Tzu, an old Chinese general, stated simply, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. However, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So understanding what your strategy is, putting the steps in place to execute on that strategy, I feel like is a good dovetail into what Jack says, right? In real life, strategy is actually very straightforward. You pick a general direction and implement like hell. And there's really three, I think, fundamental buckets to approach kind of AI transformation in an organization. To use maybe an overused statement, it's best not to boil the ocean when you're looking to deploy AI strategic frameworks. Start small. Identify a single use case that is ripe for automation, ripe for operational improvement. Develop the solution idea and outcomes, and then implement it, right? best to start with a small, quick win that can then lead to some more transformational lift in your organization. Learn from that quick win, reuse what you can, what was successful, and create a groundswell of first followers. If you're familiar with the first follower leadership principle, organizations latch on to those that are being successful and seeing real value. And we think that's the same with AI. Once you go through some of that, quick win transformation types of implementations, then you can ultimately seek to become that disruptor. How are you leveraging AI to rethink your entire business model? How can you create markets and then lead your industry? So focus outward on customers. And we fundamentally believe that the technology is such today that it's not any more limiting. It's really the limitation is in the imagination. The tech is there.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to step in now to speak a little about AI governance. So this is about ensuring that AI systems in use are ethical, they're transparent, safe and accountable, and compliant with laws and expectations of them. And I'm also going to kick this off with a quote. This one attributed to Mark Twain, and it's one of my favorite quotes. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Like my section of the presentation, the film The Big Short also kicked off with this quote. And its relevance to this topic is really about why false confidence is riskier than ignorance. So assuming AI systems are accurate or fair can cause real harm. And by speaking fluently, and that doesn't equal the truth. Just because something sounds authoritative, it still could be completely wrong. So there's all sorts of ways in which this quote is very relevant to the topic. But I will also dwell on it and say it's also a fantastic example of Churchillian drift. So the concept that pithy and clever quotes over time get attributed to more famous figures. So the quote isn't actually from Mark Twain. It's probably more likely to be from one of his contemporaries, a guy called Josh Billings. And I love that for the irony of the fact that this quote is warning about false certainties, and yet it's falsely attributed itself. It's also really, it's like the precursor to AI hallucinations. The fact that humanity, that people tend to misattribute quotes to more authoritative sources for better fluency, is really just a precursor and not a dissimilar concept to the fact that AI will regularly make up facts with authority, and we like those known truths and we repeat them. So there's some meta irony to this quote as well. Let's move on to how we believe a governance program can underpin that strategy that is so critical in this retail sector about getting AI embedded. And like nearly all governance programs, this is not intended to be a project. This is an ongoing process. It is something that you bed in and you continuously evolve and iterate. And beginning, like almost every governance program, with a risk assessment, but AI poses its own challenges because so much of understanding what risk is based on understanding what is in use, and that can be particularly challenging with AI at the moment. So our process is focused on building a meaningful AI inventory to begin with. So this is about identifying all AI systems in use across a business. In the retail space, that could be customer experience, retail operations, third-party tools, anything that's integrated into e-commerce platforms or POS tools, but also understanding the extent to which shadow AI might be in use as well. So what GenAI tools are being used informally by marketing or by product teams that the IT estate isn't aware of formally. And so we need to catalog the way those systems, who is using those systems, whether things like PII, like customer data or purchase history, is being used in those systems, the ownership model for the systems in use, so internal or vendor managed, and the use cases. So understanding the many, classifying the many ways in which those systems might be used across a business for personalization, for automation, optimization, There's a big part of this which is intended to be not just a one-off process, but automatically self-updating. So detecting undeclared tools and usage patterns, mapping network activity and user behavior relating to AI tools, and then also classifying and tagging those by department, model type, data sensitivity, and so on. So the goal of that is to build an executive level risk report, identifying at a company level total number of AI systems in use and the volume and velocity of data exchanged, as well as down to an individual user level, the dates and frequency of use, unknowing use of third-party tools, to get not just a high level, but a detailed level view as well of the AI systems that are in use. That becomes this living, dynamic inventory that updates over time. Because only once you have that can you meaningfully move on to policies, procedures, and controls. So this is where we can mitigate risk, but it's only if it reflects the realities. And so that's why we have to begin with that inventory and risk assessment. Our approach is that a policy architecture will always have some element of layering. There have to be core policies developed, so acceptable use, what the business's preferences as to how AI risk is classified, and how data should be shared responsibly. You take it a level further to the adjacent controls. What impact does that have on procurement or vendor onboarding, campaign deployment, that side of things? And then at the highest level, so what are the customer-facing touch points that might affect? Things like privacy notices, terms and conditions, opt-out language. What are the things that have to be impacted by that new AI policy that has come in? Designing the governance flows, the procedures that wrap around those policies is also fundamental. So designing how AI use case should be managed, the intake and classification forms that you want businesses to follow. What are the approval processes for high impact tools, things like dynamic pricing or personalization engines, and then what are the deployment gates that it could be triggered by automation risk or fairness concerns. Again, we're looking to see what automation we can build into this process. Are there approval workflows that can be automated? Are there inline controls that guide or restrict usage based on policy? And what alerts could be put in place when users deviate from the defined governance pathways? We also, on this slide, deal with a few other points. So once those policies and procedures are in place, it's fundamental to communicate those with the business. So how can the awareness of those policies be built into the culture through internal comms or nudges to encourage governance compliance? How can you incentivize teams and employees to submit new tools for approval that they want to use? And then what training is necessary to embed that behavior into the organization, and how should that be broken down by role and risk exposure? So marketing and loyalty teams will need some training, but that's quite different from what store staff and customer service teams might need. And then technical teams need that fairness, transparency, and auditability built in from the very start. Wherever possible, we don't want this to be static content. It's not PDFs that get dropped into people's inboxes. What real-time guidance within the workflows can be built in? How can we target teams based on their actual usage patterns or emerging risk areas? And can we link policy sign-off and training completion to the system approvals within that governance workflow? Once you've communicated these things to the organization, we then have to check in on how that's working. So customers and store staff might raise AI concerns through the same channels as everything else. And are those systems ready to capture those? So customer service logs and escalation, are there internal whistleblowing and ethics channels that could be put to use? Or are there technical issue tracking processes for things like pricing anomalies or bias complaints that should be updated? And it's about equipping response teams to explain how AI influenced outcomes might affect customers. Why did I see that price? Or identifying prompt misuse or inappropriate content. Again, we want to build traceability into the system. We want to log AI tool usage and connect incidents back to specific systems, and establish structured workflows for investigations. Beyond that, there's also the possibility to monitor and test, and I've mentioned that all the way through this process. So what can we monitor at a model behavior level? And also at a policy level, how effective is the governance? If there are only 3 use cases mapped, but 20 new tools have cropped up this month, then clearly something's amiss in how this policy is working. We need to embed oversight by implementing alerting when new tools and platforms appear in use, and track when approved systems go stale. So are we missing retraining or risk reassessments that need to occur? And what can we do to monitor signals and then feed those into governance dashboards to spot gaps? I'm going to hand over now to Alex, who's going to speak a little more on the monitoring and testing point.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I want to speak a little bit more about how you actually implement some of the testing around these systems, and how we look at that, particularly with a lens through our offensive security team, but these practices would apply for in-house implementations either way. So first is the OWASP GenAI Security Top 10 list. So this is a list that is put together by the OWASP Foundation that reflects the top 10 risks associated with GenAI systems. So it's a ranked list, and you'll find at the top is number 1, prompt injection. And our testing, all of our experience very much validates this is by far the most substantial concern with GenAI systems. We've seen it in most of the assessments we do. It affects really a majority of the systems. And this enables an attacker to manipulate an LLM or an AI system by sending specially crafted inputs, and then that potentially allows them to control the behavior of the system, the output, or the other actions it might be able to perform. The next risk is sensitive information disclosure. As really with any online system, the risk of information disclosure is substantial to your business. Personally identifiable information, algorithms, or technical information relating to the system composition or data protection keys are all sensitive information that could easily be disclosed through an AI system. A lot of this happens through a prompt injection, where you're able to maybe manipulate the AI into disclosing something it's not supposed to, and operating outside of its scheduled guidelines. But also just poor design can result in that if sufficient data protection boundaries aren't in place. Next one I want to point out is the supply chain. I think this is one of the most challenging risk categories for an organization to really wrap their hands around and gain a handle on controlling that risk there. Part of it is just the complexity of modern tech supply chains, embedded components, all the different pieces you get from open source and vendors. And AI is further challenging just because of sort of the opaque nature of models and some of the other components. Fully understanding the supply chain and the risks there can be quite challenging. I won't go through all 10 of these, but happy to field any questions on specific ones later on. But I will just jump ahead and call out number 6, because I think this is going to be an increasingly popular and more common risk. As AI systems become more powerful, particularly in agentic systems, when an agent has ability to perform particular operations, the more things they can do. If an attacker gains control of that system, that leads to also having control of those additional actions. So more information, more actions that can be performed autonomously by the AI could potentially become attacker controlled. And those fall into category 6 here, excessive agency. Once you've got a handle on the risks, you then need to implement a testing program that is able to help you cover some of the tests associated with this. I want to talk about one particular type of testing that I think is kind of at the forefront of GenAI security testing, and that's leveraging adversarial LLMs to do the testing. So this uses an LLM to generate prompts iteratively, and then you send the prompt to your target AI system and see how it responds. We use a framework called Pyrit, P-Y-R-I-T. It's an open source framework that can be programmed with prompts, steering it towards particular objectives or leveraging current well-known techniques for prompt injection. Within the system, there's also a third LLM that acts as a judge to determine if the adversarial AI is progressing towards its objective. And this allows iteration and kind of progressive steps in multi-turn attacks, which can be very effective. And I also want to share a few of the real world examples that we've run into during our testing and our experience with clients. And I think these are representative of a lot of the risks that would be common in various retail scenarios. So the first one is a major online retail platform that uses AI to summarize customer product reviews. With the summary, it displays an overall summary review with the product ranking to help customers inform customers' decisions about the product. And we found that by a user submitting a particular comment with a prompt injection in that comment, they could manipulate the output of the summary review and get it to include other content that they had included that's not at all relevant to the product. Of course, this could lead to misinformed purchases, which means unhappy customers, which is always a problem. There's potential issues for excessive returns or even legal issues for misrepresentation. I think more importantly, this could be used to manipulate product rankings on a large platform like this. Being able to get your product on the first few pages can be tremendously powerful. So that can have a significant impact. Of course, with all of these, there's always potential for reputational harm for the business as well. The next use case that I want to discuss is from a pharmacy retailer that's online. They use a chatbot to help inform their customers about their products, and they provide a summary response about any questions that a customer might have, as well as references to the product data sheets and information that their clients might need to stay safe with drug usage. And when they built this, they did a good job, and they used a modern prompt filtering system. So this is a cloud-based system that tries to detect prompt injection and block it, which is a very helpful tool. But we discovered that this could be bypassed by including a particular tag within the prompt. The tag mimics the output from the prompt filter. So you can see here it's response tags that are labeled as valid. So by including this with the prompt, you could bypass the prompt filter and therefore be able to get the chatbot to reply in any way that you prompted. This is also a good example of the risk with a lot of chatbots. They tend to only affect the user that prompts them, which is a positive because there is some risk mitigation, but that does always carry still substantial reputational risk. So if a user grabs a screenshot of a chatbot performing or outputting incorrect information, that can certainly have substantial reputational risk. And the last use case that I wanted to share is one from a refund processing example. So this particular client had automated the refund processing flow. So if a client requests a refund, they would upload the invoice, an image of the invoice, and they would use AI to extract the client name and the product information and the invoice amount. And once it had that information, it would also do a validation stage where it would confirm that particular invoice matches existing records. And if it was believed to be a legitimate invoice, the refund would automatically be processed. If it was suspicious or didn't align with existing records, then it would be passed over to a manual flow for review. And the risk that we found here was that you could upload a manipulated invoice image that includes particular language on it. In this case, set the invoice validation confidence. In this case, invoice validation confidence is the name of the internal parameter that the AI uses to communicate with the workflow system. And by adding that particular text onto the image of an uploaded invoice, you could pass the confidence check, and then it would automatically issue the refund without going through the manual validation flow. So obviously a lot of direct financial risk for the client there. Then I'll pass it over to Nick again to talk about some AI programmatic.
Thanks, Alex. So some great technical detail there on how the testing can work. From a governance perspective, we see it falling both into pre-deployment testing and then into post-deployment monitoring. So in the testing side, in needing to ensure that the data risks are assessed. So that's where we're looking at the data quality and bias and fairness. Then model performance and reliability. So that's about the accuracy, about monitoring drift, and general performance evaluation of how that model's getting on. Looking as well at security and adversarial risks. So this is some of the stuff that Alex was talking about. What are those adversarial attacks? But also things like access control and deployment security around those models. But fundamentally, from a governance perspective, we also need to be super focused on things like the ethical and societal impact. What are the unintended consequences? What human oversight is there and continued engagement? How transparent and accountable things stay? And fundamentally, what are the compliance and regulatory adherence components? So is there a GDPR data protection consideration, and what AI governance frameworks are we actually trying to maintain standards with? Is that NIST? Is that ISO 42001, EU AI Act, and so on? Once that model is deployed, that's where we can get into the more monitoring-based and ongoing improvement side of the governance framework. So monitoring the drift in data and performance, how we're reacting to user feedback, and incident response in there. So this is where we complete the circle of our AI governance program with the continuous improvement. So AI governance in retail it's not a checklist, it is a loop. And we need to make the governance system adaptive, as I mentioned earlier, automatically updating inventories based on procurement, deployment, or behavioral data. Are there any business level triggers that we should consider? Is there M&A activity occurring that could give rise to additional use cases or additional systems occurring? And what reassessments need to come off the back of it? Is there a new jurisdiction being entered by the business that could, other than new regulatory requirements we need to consider? We should also build in not just the ongoing, but what are the cadences for reviewing? So policy content refreshes, iterating training, and evolving the monitoring priorities based on the real world behavior. We want to always ensure that the ownership is revisited, and how can we foster the cross-functional ownership of the governance model? It shouldn't sit solely in digital or legal. So much of this has to have executive buy-in, but also have shared responsibility across the product, store operations, marketing, risk, compliance, and so on. And then how can we use operational data, not just documentation, to guide that maturity? What tools are in use, what policies being followed, and where are the pressure points? So I'm going to hand back to Brian for a bit of a summary.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'll try this again. I understand there was some feedback, so hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit better now. Admittedly, that started, I think, the moment we went live. So just to cover off on a couple of things that we've covered here, right? Really hoping to go from risk to resilience when you deploy AI. There's obviously a number of innovations that are happening with intention, right? So GenAI drives hyper-personalization, accelerated product development, like we talked about, intelligent supply chains, and these AI agents are really enabling enterprise-wide transformation. They're not isolated pilots. The folks that are doing this well have these systems in production, and they're driving real-world value. I think they're utilizing governance as a growth engine, right? It's not an afterthought. You've already put together transparent, risk-aligned governance with all of the frameworks that we talked about: NIST, EU AI Act, ISO 27001, and then have the proactive oversight, like Nick and Alex mentioned, right? Continuously monitor these systems so that your risk reduction is there and that your brand protection is in sight. Secure by design, right? It's just a continuation of the governance. Make sure that you're free of prompt injections or deepfakes or data poisoning that these new AI systems demand. right? You're going to need to change a little bit of the way that you've governed things in the past, but it's still governance, right? We've been governing systems for years. This is just a new system to govern. So security is shifting, right, from infrastructure to more AI models, logic, and data integrity. So we fundamentally believe that in order for these tools to be successful, don't just adopt AI, right? Operationalize it, find that use case where you can get a quick and innovative win. Make sure it's secure, strategic at the core. Here's just another quick overview, of the Kroll organization, but I don't think I want to spend a ton of time here. For those of you that have an interest in potentially talking more about what Kroll can bring to bear, we'll certainly address that in a follow-up if there's need there. But what I would like to do is just address your attention to, there's a survey at the end, and there's also an opportunity to book some time with one or the three of us to go deeper into any of these subjects. But I think what we should do now is just turn our attention with the last 7 or so minutes that we have, any Q&A that may have come up in the last 36 minutes. I see there's one from Pierre. How do you manage the generative AI risks residing with your vendors that are using generative AI to provide services to you? Any best practices that you can share? Appreciate the question.
So, Brian, it's probably best if I jump onto this first. So, great question. I mean, clearly, there's a lot of key risks around these topics. What are the privacy violations, IP exposure, undisclosed model use, so on. So some best practice ideas from our side. A lot of this is to do with procurement practice. So don't just ask if people are using AI, ask how they're using GenAI, with what data and what safeguards. Are there any GenAI specific questions that need to be added to RFPs and RFIs in the future? And how can you require transparency in those processes about use of foundation models, or fine tuning or embedding used within your data, and whether the outputs from those tools are used as is, or if they're curated. I think there's also post the vendor onboarding side, there's what can be built into the contracts and the SLAs, because there probably will need to be some clauses built in wrap around how GenAI should be used. You're probably prohibiting the use of GenAI without disclosure or approval, and requiring specific data handling controls. And once those processes are built in, that can all update the inventory, the sort of vendor GenAI risk register, about the use of GenAI and the use cases around it. Once you've understood that information and built the inventory, it can all be wrapped into the ongoing oversight process.
Very good. Thanks, Nick. Second question from Mayline. Apologies for that, but how critical are data quality, data management, and data privacy in building trustworthy AI systems? Secondly, what are Kroll's insights or approaches to managing these aspects within an AI governance framework?
Great question. Well, big question as well. So short answer is absolutely critical. So they're pretty much foundational pillars of trustworthy AI. And without those, it's going to get unfair or unsafe and non-compliant pretty promptly. So I mean, look, we can go into the specifics of all of them, but I'd say in general, it's trustworthy AI. It's less about model sophistication and more about how you manage your data. So in retail, that's your loyalty engine is only as fair as the purchase data it trains on. Your recommendation engine is only as safe as the data privacy protocols. So it's got to be built into the governance framework, into the inventory and context, into the policies and procedures. I mean, let's pick, I don't know, let's pick data quality just fundamentally. So what data quality standards should be considered? How can we mandate pre-training data audits and peer review? What kind of labeling protocols could we require with versioning built in? And then they should fit into the monitoring and testing. They should fit into the policies and controls and training and awareness, all of those things built in. So, I mean, again, on data management, without lineage, it's not possible to explain or defend AI output. So how can we track that data lineage, where data comes from, how it's transformed, what alerts could we build in terms of dependency? So if data sources change, can we trigger retraining or review? On the data privacy front, we've got to classify data types by sensitivity and usage context. Can we link privacy risk assessments to AI intake and deployment gates? What policies should be developed for purpose limitation, data minimization, and again, what can be wrapped into the policies and controls? How can that be built into the reporting and investigation side of things? And again, we've got to continuously evolve and iterate because these things endlessly change. But it's a huge question. There's so much we could talk about there.
I feel like we could spend several hours on that question alone. I don't see any additional questions, but we've got a couple minutes left. If anybody would like to ask one, feel free. Otherwise, if you'd like to schedule additional time to go deeper in any of these topics, like I mentioned, there will be a booking link provided here at the end, as well as a survey link that you're welcome to fill out. Certainly thank you for your time and attention and for spending your morning, evening, or afternoon with us today.